Hello and a warm welcome to another programme in the series Reflections here on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire. I'm Richard Spenlove, and as usual at this time I spend half an hour in the company of a guest. And my guest last week, if you remember, was Donald Sinden, and it was another of those cases where 1 week wasn't enough to do justice to the story. The answer then was, of course, a second visit, and to this end he joins me again now. Welcome back, Donald. And first, can you tell me, is there anything in this line that you've not done?
No, 4 or 5 years ago I was on a similar interview to this one. I was mentioning that I'd done most things in my profession, that I've been in the theatre, obviously, films, television, radio, but I've also appeared in the circus. I was an honorary ringmaster on one occasion. I've been in the music hall. I was a straight man to Leon Cortez at one point. And I've been in a musical, pretty well everything. I said the only two things I've never done have been an opera and a ballet. The very next morning, Lord Harwood, who was then running the English National Opera Company at the Coliseum Theatre, rang me up and he said, "You've never done an opera?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, look, we're doing Ariadne auf Naxos by Richard Strauss in 6 months' time. Would you like to be in that?" I said, "Fine, please, yes." So now I've been in, the only thing I'm missing out on now is a ballet. But all of this I see is marvellous experience.
It's interesting that you should say this because a few days ago I was talking to another guest of mine, Edward Wing, and I told him that I was meeting you, and he said, Edward, of course, is an opera singer, and he said, "Oh yes, he was in an opera with me."
How extraordinary. There you are, you
There
see.
you are,
Yes. What about that?
Can I ask you now, are you expected, and I say this with the very greatest respect, are you expected to be the eccentric we so often see, and indeed so often you are classified as, when you're off duty, as it were, or indeed are you ever off duty as an eccentric?
As an actor, one is never off duty, because it's quite frightening. My wife and I have just been over in Leningrad, and it was extraordinary. There you are in Leningrad, going down around the Hermitage Museum, and one gets asked for an autograph. I mean, it's very, very flattering. So one is never actually off duty. But as far as being an eccentric, now, you see, I don't think of myself as an eccentric. But as I said much earlier, I was brought up amongst eccentrics in that village of mine. And I like eccentrics. And I'm a great devotee of expertise in any sphere. I mean, I'll spend hours watching a telephone engineer with his feet in one of those holes in the pavement, where he's got 15,000 wires in one hand and 15,000 in the left, and he's going to join them together. Now, how does he know? No wonder we get cross lines. You know, I mean, it's brilliant. How do they do it, these people? Also, what you don't know is that I'm a great hedge man. I love hedges. And I don't have a hedge here, but a lot of neighbours do, and I cut their hedges for them, you see. And not only that, I carry a pair of secateurs. And if I'm out for a walk and I see somebody's hedge looking a bit sort of raggedy, I'm prone to sort of just nipping a bit off here and there. You know. Stratford, yes, going over the little old footbridge there, there was a holly tree that was leaning right over the path. And I went along one night with my secateurs and trimmed it right back. And they think I'm a nutcase, but you know, it looks beautiful now.
If you find yourself short of work any time, and you find yourself anywhere near Harston, there is a hedge there that consistently wants cutting, a lawn that wants mowing, and a garden that wants digging.
No, digging the garden, no, don't fancy that one, but I don't mind doing the lawn. The lawn and hedges, I love. And I try to cultivate friends who've got hedges. And I don't mean doing topiary work, I don't want to know about that. But my hedges, you cut yourself on the corners of them.
Well, I've certainly been trying to cultivate a friend who's prepared to do mine for me, so perhaps we can get together after the show. Can we turn now to your personal life, as it were? I know that you are married. When were you married and to whom?
In 1947, I was at Stratford, and I'd been there the previous year. And in 1947, there was a new influx of members of the company. And on the first day of rehearsals, there were 6 new girls arrived. And I cast my eye around the 6 new girls, and I thought one of them was jolly pleasant and might be the one, you see. And so I homed in there. And indeed, the following year, we got married, 1948. So Diana, as my wife Diana, who was, as I say, a member of the company in 47.
It's silly to ask you, I know about children, because anyone with a television set knows that you have them. Your chance now, though, to extol their virtues to us.
Yes, well, as you say, you know both of them, Jeremy and Mark. They are my two sons. And I in no way tried to get them to follow into my business. But I'm afraid you see, the theatre actors, I need to tell you this, when the curtain comes down on a performance at 11 o'clock at night, the adrenaline is flowing through the veins, you see. And so after 11 o'clock at night is the equivalent to normal people's evening, sitting back to watch the television. So very few theatre actors can get to bed before 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's our evening. So 2 o'clock in the morning, it means you're not getting up for breakfast until 10 in the morning. Well, you see, my sons saw me staying in bed until 10 and thought, my God, this must be a good life, you know. Not bad, so we'll go in for it. And they did. They both followed me. First one and then the other. And it would have been hideously embarrassing for me if they'd been bad actors, but thank goodness they are both, shouldn't say it myself, but they are both rather good.
Indeed, Jeremy, I think, has his own company.
He has indeed. He's been acting for many years. You're talking about fame just now, and it was when he was on Crossroads that did him the biggest amount of good. Suddenly he became, especially when he got Meg Richardson's stepdaughter's, wait a minute, she got Meg Richardson's daughter pregnant, you see, that's what he did, yes, and became a household name for this fact.
Were you not ashamed of him doing that?
Slightly, he didn't do it on screen. Yes. But thank goodness, yes, as you say, he's recently, a month ago, started his own company and has taken Oscar Wilde's An Ideal Husband out on a tour. And indeed, they were in Cambridge very recently.
And indeed, on the Monday night, I think there was only one person in Cambridge who knew where you were.
You're right. Yes, it was most extraordinary. He was in Cambridge. And I thought I'd surprise the boy, you see, because I don't mean he gets frightened if I'm in front, but he gets apprehensive if I'm in the audience. So I didn't tell him. I thought I'll nip up on Monday night by myself, have a look, see how he's getting on. So I drove up the M11 and arrived in Cambridge, got to the theatre to find there wasn't a seat left in the house. Not a seat left. So I had to wait for a return, which is a bit embarrassing. And then son Mark, he's done mainly theatre work. Jeremy's done mostly television and films. Mark's done mainly theatre. And indeed, this year, at Chichester, I was in Major Barbara, and he was playing my son in the same play, which was rather nice.
Now that Jeremy has established his own company, how would you feel about working for your own son?
Working for him, that's an entirely different thought, isn't it? I do, yes. I've worked with them both, but to work for him might be a bit dodgy. Indeed, I think I'd enjoy it. Yes. What a frightening thought. Yes,
Right.
Suddenly having one son telling one what to do, you know, it might be a bit tricky, mightn't it?
Well, most of them try it most of the time, don't they?
All the time, yes.
They're always wiser than us, aren't they?
Yes.
Have you, is there a next generation, as it were, down?
Oh, yes, well, we've got 3 grandchildren. Jeremy's got 2 daughters and Mark's got 1 son. The grandson and one of the granddaughters are 8.5 years old, and then there's a new one called Harriet, who's 4. A tomboy. But whether they're going to become actors, I don't know. That's a bit tricky. It's very funny having people in the family like that. Jeremy is currently appearing in a comedy series on ITV called Square Deal. And he said to his daughter, Kezia, aged 8.5, Dad is on the television tonight, and she said, "Oh, well, I'm going to watch LOLO." You know, I mean, it's marvellous. They do put you in your place a bit, don't they?
Do you ruin them?
Oh, I'm besotted about them. Absolutely besotted about them. It's nauseating.
No, it isn't. But go on.
Isn't it? Are you a grandfather
Yes,
yourself? Are
yes.
you really? I mean, it's lovely, isn't it?
It
I mean,
is.
they're so. I mean, all our swans are geese. Geese are swans. Ducks are. What's the phrase? All our ducks are swans, or something.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Oh yes.
They're all the best in the world, aren't they?
They're best in the world. I mean, couldn't be. I love them very much indeed.
In fact, further to that, then, I mean, how did your children react to you?
Well, I remember when Jeremy was away at boarding school, I was on the phone to him one day, and I said, Jeremy, we are toying with the idea of buying a Rolls Royce. And he said, well, don't come and see me in it. I said, what do you mean? He said, it's bad enough having an actor for a father, not going to have you turning up in a Rolls Royce. And refused to allow us to have one, so we never did.
How do you, on the subject of being in the public eye, how do you personally deal with the issue of recognition, and does it ever irritate you?
No, I learned a lesson very, very early on. In 1953, I made a film in Kenya with Ava Gardner and Clark Gable. And I know we were at 700 miles from Nairobi, in the middle of the bush. We came to a little tiny African village, 6 grass huts gathered in a little circle. And when we came there, the kids were coming out and asking Clark Gable for his autograph. I thought, I don't believe this. So afterwards, I said to Clark, you notice the way I said Clark? Yes, you know. I said to Clark, I mean, don't you ever get fed up with this? I mean, he couldn't walk down any street without being recognized. And he said, the time to worry is when it stops. And it's the wisest advice anyone's ever given. Wonderful. Because it's perfectly true. When it stops, it's not a good sign. So one's got to live with it. It's fine, except when one is mistaken for somebody else, which happens quite frequently. Yes. Tony Britton, he and I are mistaken for each other quite frequently. And I was telling somebody about this, the other, a group of people are saying, they said, but you can't be mistaken for Tony Britton. And I said, you'd be surprised all the time. We're being mistaken for each other. People tell him that he was in certain programs. They tell me that I was in his. And they said, but that's absurd. I mean, you're nothing like each other. It's quite extraordinary. Then one of them said, no, that's quite right. I mean, when you were in Robin's Nest, they said. I said, that was Tony Britton.
Can we look now a little bit more deeply into your other interests? For instance, what does being a member of the Royal Society of Arts call for, mean, or imply?
Oh, crikey. Well, the Royal Society of Arts, I discovered some 30 years ago, an astonishing group of people, or society. Almost any invention that has been world-shattering, has always been shown first at the Royal Society of Arts, because it's the Society of Arts and Commerce. So anything that is likely to affect commerce or arts. For instance, Marconi, when he invented his radio way out on the down somewhere.
Sounds as though somebody's trying to get hold of you on the telephone.
Yes, I hope it's my agent. Yes. But his first public demonstration of how this radio thing would work was at the Royal Society of Arts. You see. It's a bit academic, the thing. But I joined it 30 years ago, and it's a marvelous society.
There they go, then the Airmen of Note and Moonlight Serenade. You're listening to BBC Radio Cambridgeshire, the programme's Reflections. I'm Richard Spendlove and my guest, Donald Sinden. Donald, you're also a member of the Theatre Museum Advisory Council. What does that call upon you to...
Now you're on to sort of my activities. Well, in the first place, I've got to quote Francis Bacon, who made a wonderful remark. He said, "Every man is a debtor to his profession." And I think it's rather a good line. One gets so much out of one's profession. One enjoys one and one loves it. That I always think we owe it to put a lot back in. So things like the theatre history have always fascinated me. So I've allied myself to various causes over the theatre over the years. And the Theatre Museum, we were astonished. 1957, I joined that. 1957, 31 years ago. When you find that there are museums, we're living in the age of the specialist museum. There are museums on almost every subject you can think of. Indeed, in London, there's actually a museum of the lavatory. Every regiment has its regimental museum. And if you think about it, I mean, places like the National Gallery is only a museum of painting. And we thought that this is disgraceful. The theatre, which is the one art in which the British have excelled the world for 400 years, was not commemorated in any way at all. So we formed a society committed to the ideal of forming a theatre museum, which April last year, we saw open in Covent Garden. Wonderful. To at last have a place of reference, anytime you want to know anything about the theatre at all, there it is, you go there and find out.
It's interesting that you should come to Covent Garden, because it brings me nicely to another of your interests, London architecture. Expand, if you will, on the matter of this Covent Garden scheme insofar as you see it.
Personally, I'm against the expansion idea of the Opera House, because it would mean destroying these wonderful buildings there. Beautiful 18th century houses. I know they've got shops on the ground floor now, but they're beautiful 18th century houses. And the theatre can operate perfectly well without them. I know we're always short of money, and the British are quite dreadful. We give less state money than any other civilized country to the arts. It's really terrifying. When you think that in Germany alone, the opera houses of Hamburg, Cologne, and Munich, those three opera houses, between them, receive the equivalent of our entire Arts Council grant for all the theatres and everything in this country. So we don't give nearly enough. So certainly Covent Garden needs more money, but this is not the way to get it.
Ecclesiology.
Oh, ecclesiology, yes. It's a lovely word, isn't it?
It is.
Ecclesiology. The study of church architecture. Well, there's a point. I developed this from my grandfather, as I say, who was an architect. His idea of a perfect holiday. I'm talking about the beginning of the century now. Before the turn of the century, yes. His idea of a perfect holiday was to take his bicycle on a train to a given point, and he'd then spend his fortnight's holiday bicycling around that area, sketching all the buildings that interested him, and mainly churches. Not just churches themselves, but the details of doorways, windows, fonts, anything that interested, just a tombstone in the churchyard he would draw. And he used to take my mother with him. And I went with him shortly before he died on a couple of occasions, but then my mother used to continue this education of mine. And so you've no idea how fascinating church architecture is until you know something about it. So many people stop at a village or a town and pop into a church and have a quick look and say, "Oh, isn't it nice?" And off they go again. Each church in this country is like a book, because very, very few churches have been built all in one go. I think Salisbury Cathedral is probably the only one of the major buildings. And you can see little bits of Saxon work, Norman work, early English. And so I've even stuck my neck out now, and I've written a book on the subject. I've got my grandfather's vast collection of drawings. They've all sort of come through, thank goodness. He never seemed to give any away. So we've got this enormous collection, and I've done a book. It's a sort of beginner's guide to church architecture. not too serious. It's a bit jokey here and there, do you know? But it's a great enthusiasm of mine, and I hope I can impart some of my own enthusiasm to the reader. And it's illustrated by my grandfather's drawings of the various buildings and windows, doors, everything. So when I talk about a triforium, there is one pictured.
When are we going to see it?
Oh, it's due out in, just in time for Christmas. What about that? It's inclined to be that sort of book, you know. It's one that really serious ecclesiologists will want it, I suppose, because of the drawings, because they were done at the turn of the century and quite a lot of the buildings aren't there anymore. But the text matter, my contribution, is for the beginner.
There is so much of your work that one could home in on, so let's talk about just one, the most recent, Never the Twain.
Oh, Never the Twain. It's turned out to be remarkably popular, I'm delighted to say. And Windsor Davis and I do that. We play the two antique dealers. And it's very fortunate because we are so opposite, such opposites, Windsor and I, but we get on like a house of fire. We're supposed to be playing two people who hate each other, but Windsor and I are very, very fond of each other. And it's a great joy every year when we do it. We've been doing it now for 8 years. And I'm delighted with it, and it seems to be popular. So as long as it's popular, let's go on doing it.
Another question I think I shall have to ask. Shall you retire or shall you die working?
No, I'm bound to die working, I think, because the funny thing is that my wife tells me that I'm a workaholic, and I'm never happy unless I'm working. And I always like to have 2 or 3 things going at the same time, and all my hobbies are allied to my work. So wherever I am in England, I can pick these hobbies up and continue with them. Architecture and church architecture specifically, browsing around, so wherever I am I can pick it up. My genealogy, I keep in a briefcase, so wherever I am I can pick it up and enter a few more details. But as far as work is concerned, all actors love their job, you see, and we can never understand why people want to retire. Because if anybody retires, it means they have not really enjoyed what they've been doing. They can't wait to get rid of it and to move on to something else. But actors just love what they're doing, and if we weren't paid for it, we'd still do it for nothing.
2 more slightly allied questions then. The first one, of all the people that you've met, who stands out most especially?
That's a tricky one, because one has to admit here, you see, that actors are thieves. Actors are thieves. All the time, we're travelling around and we're keeping our eyes open, because everybody we meet in the street gives us a few clues as to a possible character to be played in the future. The way somebody walks, the way somebody sort of wears their hat, the way they talk. We all try to copy these things. We don't let the person concerned know about this. But for instance, I mean, when I was in a play called, what was it called? Shut Your Eyes and Think of England. Yes. I was playing a very insignificant bookkeeper from Coulsdon in Surrey. And I copied my makeup exactly from Sir William Rees-Mogg. I comb my hair in the way he does. I had steel spectacles, as he does, you see. I never told him that, but I mean, that's what I did, pinched it from him. And we're always stealing idiosyncrasies. So it's very difficult to say of which one person has impressed us most, because we had, as it were, trained to keep our eyes open and watch people generally.
Let's ask the other question then and see what reaction we get to this. Who would you most like to have met had you had the opportunity?
I think from the actor's point of view, one must immediately say Shakespeare. It's got to be Shakespeare, to ask him what he meant by so many of his lines. And I'm sure he'd answer that he hasn't the faintest idea, but it would be a great privilege to have met him. But I think for myself, I would like to have met Michelangelo. Yes. There was a man of many parts. My God, what a sculptor, you see. And being colourblind, I appreciate sculpture more than paintings, because paintings I miss a lot in by lack of colour. But sculpture, I find I have an increased perception for form. And sculpture I love, and he turned out one of the world's greatest masterpieces in that sense.
Donald, you are to be stripped of every memory that you have, and you are going to be left with one. Share it with us.
Just one.
Just one.
So I'm not allowed to say it was the first time I saw Venice or something like that. No.
Well, not unless that's going to be the
unless
one.
that's the one. No, but I've got to forget things like that. Seeing the Taj Mahal. No. No, I'm not allowed to mention any of these. No, I won't mention those then.
No, quite.
The first time I heard Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. I'm not allowed to mention that.
No.
Or no, let me see. No, I'm not allowed to mention the Himalayas.
No.
I would say, therefore...
Good Lord, are we going to get to it?
James Agate always used to say that if he had one wish, it would have been to have been at the first night of Hamlet, not to know how the play ends. We all know now, you see, but not to have known, to be the first night of... Anyway, so that would have been... No, but I won't mention that one either. I won't mention Hamlet. Oddly enough, to be serious, one of the most impressive things in my life was the first time I was present and heard for the first time the Messiah. Yes, I was quite young. I say quite young. I was 22, 3, something like that. And I went to the Albert Hall where they were doing the Messiah. And I sat in my seat. I could not believe my ears. I mean, not having ever heard any of that music before. And there came the Hallelujah. What about that? I mean, can you go further than that? And you came to the end of it and you thought, that is it. I mean, that is, as Sidney Smith once said, his idea of heaven was eating pâté de foie gras to the sound of trumpets. Yes, and one had that feeling with it. The excitement of hearing the Hallelujah. And I thought, well, that's it. Might as well go home now. Little did I think the Amen was still to come. And I sat there, tears running down my cheeks, thrilled. No, I can't say more than I think that was one of the most impressionable moment of my life.
Donald, I can't thank you enough. It's been absolutely marvellous talking to you.
Thank you very much indeed for staying for so long.
Well, I'm afraid that's about as far as we can go in this week's edition of Reflections here on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire. My thanks to Donald Sinden for this week and indeed again for last week. But most especially, of course, as always, my thanks to you for listening. Until next week then, goodbye and do take care.